So let me introduce our speaker today. Valerie Buck is the Rare Anglo-American Literature Cataloger at Brigham Young University, where she has worked for 10 years. She's been active on committees and given presentations for conferences of the American Library Association, the Utah Library Association, IFLA, the Pacific Islands Association of Libraries, Archives and Museums, and the Hawaii Library Association. It was during her time in Hawaii that she became interested in multicultural library users, an interest that continues today. And what we're going to do is feel free to put comments and questions in the chat box, and then Valerie will address those as we get to the end of her presentation. So we're not ignoring you. We just want Valerie to be able to get through what she wants to talk about, and then we'll get to your questions. So thanks everybody for joining us today, and welcome, Valerie.
Hello. I have a little bit of spring pollen allergies going, so hopefully that won't get in the way. But I am happy to be here today to talk about this subject, which I'm very interested in still, even though I've began this research several years ago. And the paper that I am presenting from, I submitted to IFLA and presented at IFLA in Lyon, France in 2014. So at the time I started this specific research, I had a colleague, Anik Huzey, who was helping with the research, and then she, for health reasons, had to back out. So the paper has her name on it too, of course. And so that's just if anyone gets confused about when they see the paper. Anyway, to get started, I'd like to explain what prompted this research. I, of course, have always been interested in multicultural library users. And one day I was watching PBS and I found this documentary called The Science of Healing with Dr. Esther Sternberg. And it opened my eyes to how our environments can affect us, and how whether we are affected negatively or positively, it can affect our healing and many other things to do with our body. And so as I was watching it, I kept thinking, wow, that could definitely apply to libraries. And so I began that research. And the purpose was to research how the healthcare industry constructs environments to better meet the needs of their users, specifically multicultural users, and then use that so that libraries can find new approaches to better serve multicultural users. And multicultural users are individuals who come from a myriad of backgrounds and worldviews. Most often they are thought of as people who do not share the same language or ethnic background as the dominant culture. But they can also be people from diverse religious or socioeconomic backgrounds, people whose various customs, beliefs, and ways of life create diversity in the demographics of any community. So I'm going to share some definitions now. The substantial research in the healthcare industry on environments such as hospitals describes how many healthcare providers are attempting to create healing space. This is space that it's a low-stress environment in which better healing can occur. And the healthcare approach to providing low-stress space can be applied to libraries to create an environment where learning and information gathering is more successful because anxiety is reduced. Now, in the library research, there's a lot about library anxiety. And this can be described as a state in which library users experience stress and anxiety about their information needs, potentially leading to failed library experiences. And this can happen because of the environment or experience is unfamiliar and it's overwhelming.
Valerie? Valerie, I'm sorry, this is Dana. I just want to double check. Are you still on your main slide, or have you?
I have moved.
Forwarding?
Is it? Yeah.
Is anyone seeing just the main slide still? So I'm going to pass you the ball. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but let's see if that helps. Okay, so let me know.
I see some. Okay.
Okay, it looks like it's doing now. Okay, we're on the slide that says, what prompted this research?
Okay, so that's where I explained what prompted the research. I'll show you the next slide. And this is the purpose that I talked about. And this is definitions, so healing space. And this is definitions, library anxiety. And then here's multicultural users. So for multicultural library users, the risk factors for experiencing library anxiety are especially high because of the causes of anxiety, such as language barriers and confusing cultural practices, are increased. Although the causes and pathways to the stress can be very different, the solutions to reduce the stress and stimulate healing can give libraries new approaches for shaping less stressful environments for their users, especially multicultural users. Okay, so I'm going to present some scenarios here. And I do want to stress, though, that libraries, of course, do not encounter the emergency level of stress that hospitals do, of course, but the similarities are still there. So anyone who enters a hospital for the first time encounters an unfamiliar world. Even for visitors who have been to the hospital in the past, the present hospital will be different. In fact, visitors who have even been to this hospital in the past will probably find things that are unknown. So chances are the visitors also arrive in a state of anxiety for themselves, for their loved ones, and this anxiety can range from mild frustration to strong worry and even fear. Fortunate visitors will find good signs and helpful staff to direct them where they need to go. The hallways and the rooms will look clean and bright. The decor will be attractive and peaceful, and strange noises and smells will not or be noticeable or just very little. There will be little between the visitors and their destination that heightens their anxiety, and in fact, they may arrive at their goal feeling calmer than when they began. So the peaceful surroundings will have helped their stress level as they move through the space. At their destination, they find friendly and non-judgmental people to help them. And as they work through their medical reasons for being there, they might feel that their situations are more under their own control than they originally thought. And they feel a reinforced feeling of well-being with surroundings that nurture their personal control, their feeling of that, and their safety. And it may help to resolve their medical issue faster because they've had their stress reduced, and there is abundant research to prove that this can happen. Now, for unfortunate visitors, the experience can be quite different. Once inside a hospital's doors, they may fail to find helpful signs or maps. Several people may be waiting to talk to an overbusy receptionist. Other hospital staff hurry back and forth with clear expressions of "I'm too busy" or "important to talk to you" on their faces. Monochromatic or poorly lit and equipment-covered, cluttered corridors disappear back into strange noises and smells. The hallways may display signs here and there, but they are in medical jargon that tends to confuse rather than help visitors. Most of the hospital atmosphere between the visitors and their destination tends to erode their sense of control and possibly even safety. When the visitors finally arrive at their goal, their state of anxiety has not been eased by their surroundings, and very likely it has been exacerbated. At their destination, the staff seems to treat them as yet another number in the system, sometimes answers questions coldly or do not explain procedures very well or at all. So even if the medical issue is solved, they may be slower to respond in the future to a like need at this hospital, or they may go somewhere else where they may get lesser quality care. So now consider these scenarios for somebody whose language, culture, or worldview differ greatly from the people and the places in this hospital. The unknowns and the confusion encountered by someone from a multicultural population can potentially be greater. Both of the above scenarios can easily be paralleled to library experiences. So easily, in fact, that it is painful to see the similarities in the second scenario especially. The second scenario not only fails to reduce stress, but it creates it. So several fascinating studies in the medical field have demonstrated why reducing stress is so important. In his landmark study, Roger S. Ulrich analyzed 9 years' worth of documented surgical patients, all recovering from cholecystectomies in the same wing of a Pennsylvania hospital. Half of the patients enjoyed a window view of nature, and half had a view that viewed a brick wall. Eliminating all subjects who did not fit a controlled profile, Ulrich proved that the patients with a view of nature used less pain medication, experienced fewer complications, and recovered more quickly than the patients with a view of the brick wall. So this really sparked a lot of interest in the medical field, and more people began studying it. And these all confirmed what Ulrich had discovered, which was that reducing stress can help patients heal faster and heal better. And so that affected how they began to think their space planning and the services they provided. These changes focused on two main points. One, the idea that reduced stress can help healing, can help improve it substantially, and that the environment can significantly affect stress and anxiety levels. So anything in the environment. So it can include, yes, a view from a window, but it also includes anything from the 5 senses: sights, sounds, smells, textures, and taste. It includes architecture, layout, interior layout, decorations, lighting, air quality, temperature, sounds. And it includes also, of course, how humans react and interact with each other. So this boils down to how the above qualities in these surroundings affect human dignity and well-being and feelings of personal control and safety. And this includes, of course, a feeling of cultural safety. So when the environment erodes these feelings, the result is more anxiety and stress, and it can be detrimental to healing. Now, this, of course, can affect libraries, and it can negatively affect successful information seeking. Now, as I quoted before, library anxiety can have debilitating effects to anyone's ability to perform library information seeking behaviors. Anything that they go to, any tasks where they're searching for information, this can affect. And so the library research demonstrates that in individuals with high levels of library anxiety often exhibit cognitive, affective, and physiological symptoms that may include discomfort, fear, tension, feelings of uncertainty, learned helplessness, self-defeating thoughts, and mental disorganization. So, and then much of this literature ascribes to multicultural users even higher levels of anxiety because of all the new, different, and unfamiliar or socially uncomfortable situations they encounter. So what this means for libraries. I have created this slide here and it's very drab, of course, and looking very ugly. And you very much notice the very standout red and stress and all that. This is exactly the same information and the same image, but it's very different because the image you see is helping to calm down any stress and helping just looking at it makes you feel better. So that is just a small demonstration of how much a difference these things can make. So moving into cultural responsiveness. So a lot of library research about multicultural users has findings that fall in the category of what is called cultural competencies. More specifically, they fall into the fact-centered approach of cultural competencies. This approach begins with teaching multicultural awareness and then plans initiatives such as directing staff to learn about an array of behaviors or beliefs belonging to multicultural populations they may serve. So, and then building on this, they make goals to display multicultural artwork or acquire non-native language materials, partner with multicultural organizations in the community, and they can change or improve signage and translate things into specific languages, and they may also hire somebody from a multicultural background. These are good things to do, and many libraries have been doing this. Unsurprisingly, researchers in the medical world have been doing the same thing in doing these studies, and they have recommended similar solutions. Recently, some studies have shifted their recommendations away from the fact-centered approach to an attitude-centered approach. Two main issues that have problematized the fact-centered approach is, first, that attempting to train staff in fact-centered competencies may never result in an acceptable grasp of even one culture, let alone several. And it still leaves staff guessing. And second, reducing cultures to lists and categories tend to lead to stereotyping. So a researcher named Sarah Bowen points out that even people from the same country and background can differ vastly in socioeconomic status and other characteristics that would never they would never categorize themselves in the same category. So Bowen emphasized that what is needed is a goal to assess each patient individually. This asks for more staff requiring an open and humble attitude and a fresh assessment of every patient, or in library's case, every user. So the assessment doesn't need to be free of any knowledge about that culture, of course, but it needs to come across with respect, respect for each patient's unique construct and background. So this means that training staff in cultural behaviors lists and libraries should, instead of doing this, libraries should focus on being culturally responsive and open to anything different from dominant cultures and free of judgments that may value any culture above another. So another researcher, Maurice Phillips, has developed some recommendations for this cultural responsiveness, and many of you have probably seen this because it's in the library world too, but these are just some quick ideas. Remember that the individual is the background. The individual is the foreground and the culture is the background. Individuals aren't cultural cutouts. Not everyone identifies with their ethnic background. And remember that much is common across cultures. Beware your own cultural assumptions, show respect for other cultures, and beware the unconscious privileging of your own culture. So for libraries to provide culturally safe spaces, cultural responsiveness, falls squarely in the category of training. although we can also apply this to physical spaces as well, which we'll get to in a minute. Library employees need to pay attention to how they may be making stereotypical assumptions, unconsciously privileging any culture above another, and definitely should not concentrate on cultural differences. And one of the main reasons for this is because language difference, not cultural beliefs, is by far the main barrier to communication. So what is needed is a kind of cultural humility and to approach every situation with that. So improvement in one specific aspect of cultural responsiveness may go a long way to helping. This is reinforcing in our users a sense of personal control. So a sense of personal control has been emphasized in the healthcare research as a significant influence on an individual's levels of stress and sense of well-being. Unsurprisingly, many healthcare researchers find that patients in hospitals feel a significant loss of personal control over themselves and their surroundings. Patients' own bodies become the object of others' observation, treatment, cleaning, and feeding. They can't wander anywhere they want. They can't eat or sometimes even go to the toilet whenever they want. They can't control their privacy with hospital people coming in, going all the time. And the physical environment, whether it is pleasant or not, is imposed on them, as are their personal nurses. When conditions contribute to an overall lack of control because of the unfamiliar surroundings and routine and lack of privacy and authority over their situation, it can result in stress. Dr. Esther Sternberg states, the less control you have, the more stressed you feel, and the more you are in control, the less stressed you will be. Researchers assert that patients' feeling of personal control were found to be a central feature of emotional comfort. So emotional discomfort caused by feelings of loss of control exacerbated stress and hindered healing. So a lack of personal control can affect library users as well, and in the same way, more anxiety. Consider the multicultural user who feels out of place and outnumbered by the library's dominant culture, which includes staff and other patrons, and thus unempowered. Or perhaps the user feels their own perceived inadequate or culturally wrong, in quotes, information-seeking behavior is being judged, that they have no choice but to learn the right way of doing things. In unfamiliar or simply different surroundings, their knowledge of how to proceed is perhaps of little help to them, and they are at the mercy of library staff. Healthcare industry researchers have found that a feeling of dependence sometimes results in a perception that the patient's personal value has been diminished. So in other words, having to ask for help can make someone feel diminished because someone else is in control, and this can cause anxiety or even fear. A large factor in the feeling of dependence can come from language barriers. Not only might users be struggling with the language of the dominant culture, they will likely struggle with the foreign language of library jargon. Either struggle may be enough to stop information seeking in its tracks unless users can get help, and maybe sometimes significant help. Circumventing the barrier caused by what is essentially two unfamiliar languages may seem impossible because it confronts users with such potent feelings of powerlessness. Because language is the main barrier to understanding in multicultural situations, the need for libraries to find ways to overcome this barrier cannot be overemphasized. In order to give a sense of control back to library patrons, libraries should look at their environments as newcomers would. Look at signage, and is it in good places and not just clear language? Is it in places that help? Where will people be forced to ask questions and perhaps avoid asking because it diminishes their feeling of personal value and increases their feeling of dependence? Some researchers have even spoken about the symbolic meaning in our environments that communicates a set of messages to its users, which dominant culture users from the dominant culture will understand, but that users from a multicultural background will miss. So this is the idea of the given. What do we take as given that multiculturals will not understand? And so we look at, it's good to look at having policies, making them visible, and of course looking at what can be altered or deleted from our policies, because maybe we're in a hidebound situation and not looking at the wider picture. And most importantly, how do the library staff come across to multicultural users, intentionally or unintentionally? So are behaviors, knowingly or unknowingly, subtracting from the user's sense of personal control? Well, since all libraries and library communities are different, when we begin to assess how our environment contributes or subtracts from a sense of personal control, it must be an individual one. The important step is to look for them and begin to resolve them. So cultural responsiveness reminds librarians that the library itself possesses its own culture, and that libraries act from within this culture as much as library users act from within their own culture. So this awareness is essential, because chances are that any given library operates within the tradition of keeping the control. Libraries historically have been grown as places that exist on notions of order, progress, authority, and control, such as the sacred authority of texts and the idea that libraries impose order on the chaos of human thought. When what libraries and library staff do comes from a position of knowledge and a tradition of delivering services and teaching how to use them, it will of course be difficult not to privilege the culture of the library institution. So this is again a place where training is very important. And especially for libraries to look at, maybe things may not always have to be done in a certain way, and changing so that we can pave the road to better cultural humility and solutions that give the sense of control back to the users. Okay, now we're going to consider the physical environment more closely. Many researchers since Ulrich have concluded that aesthetics in local surroundings influences to a high degree the health and well-being of patients. Dr. Esther Sternberg explains that beautiful scenes activate our body's natural endorphins. As more color, depth, and movement are added, the more endorphins flood our bloodstream. And, quote, your own brain gives you a morphine high, unquote. Endorphins improve our physiological and emotional state, and in effect are the natural way for the human body to reduce stress and anxiety. Not only do endorphins reduce these negative chemical reactions, they also can stimulate the body and the mind. I want to stress that, and the mind. Sternberg relates an account that shows how this can occur, and it's a very interesting story. Virologist Jonas Salk encountered an impasse while he was trying to develop the polio vaccine back in the 1950s. So he felt frustrated and demoralized and like he was blocked. So he decided to take a sabbatical to Assisi, Italy. And while he was there, he became so inspired by the light and the beauty and even the spiritual aura of the place that he was able to come up with a solution to his problem. So after this stimulating experience, he worked with architects to build the Salk Institute, which is a research facility in La Jolla, California, in a fashion that was specifically designed to be a place suffused with light and surrounded by beautiful views, a place that would inspire the imagination of other scientists just as he had been inspired. So there are many aspects of the physical environment that can affect users. These include the effects of colors, window views, room design, cultural stimuli, artificial lighting, sunshine coming indoors, views of nature in both artwork and from outside, feelings of security created by the physical surroundings, noise levels and harmony, and balance in layout. All of these, manipulated thoughtfully, can reduce stress and improve well-being not only for patients, but of course for staff as well. Library planners may not be able to start manipulating their environment, the physical environment, from the ground up as Salk did, but can still redesign their environments into spaces that reduce stress and stimulate the brain. So some of these, just very quickly, some ideas. Here's a quick list of where libraries can begin. Colors. Consider colors of furniture, walls, carpet, artwork. And I mean, who among us has not been in a medical clinic or a hospital where it's just so institutionally white that it's depressing? So even one patient in a hospital described it as vapid. So avoid vapid and aim for pleasant. In the wayfinding, of course, there's the clear signage and abundant signage, but also consider how-to signage for public equipment, and avoid labyrinthine floor plans, confusing cues such as dim lights and narrow entrances to major destinations. The maintenance and cleanliness is a big one. So if something is dirty and shabby and scary looking even, it can evoke negative judgments. And that isn't just about somebody thinking, well, that's a dump, but it can make them feel as if that institution doesn't care enough to bother to care enough about the people who come to clean up and fix things. In the ambiance category, consider using non-glare full spectrum lighting, because lesser types of lighting have been shown to dampen moods. And eliminate unnecessary noise if you can. Make sure the temperature is not too hot or cold and that the air is free of unpleasant smells. Consider playing selected music. Music has been shown to reduce stress and promote wellness, and music can be multilingual. So, and then just the thing about nature, I also cannot emphasize enough. And I've chosen, as you hopefully noticed, the background of my slides, like I said before, to have a view of nature. So provide large, numerous, and clean windows looking onto views of nature if you can. But also generously decorate interior spaces with potted plants and artwork. Studies have shown that potted plants inside, can increase the productivity of users and staff. It can increase attentiveness, reduce stress and mental fatigue, lower blood pressure, and improve feelings of well-being. So keep in mind a general goal. And this includes everything that you can manipulate in the environment. And I also want to explain about artwork. I have a picture here that it's not a picture hanging on a wall, but in my library, they built this fireplace to make it feel more homey. So artwork, whether it's something hanging on the wall or decorations wherever they are, they can be, there's no way that a librarian making these changes can find something that will appeal to all the cultures that may come use the library, but consider that there is a commonality across cultures in certain images that will reduce stress and hold attention in positive ways. And the most common of these are positive, caring, human faces and certain views of nature. So as libraries plan initiatives to create environments that reduce stress and stimulate creativity for their users, especially multicultural users, it is important to realize that all causes of stress probably can't be eliminated, But there's still hope because not all stress needs to be removed from the environment to be successful. Some stress response is healthy and desirable. It can bring about learning and growth. It is when stress overwhelms a user that a reductive experience begins. So Dr. Sternberg explains there's a dose effect of stress on performance described by an inverted U-shaped curve. Imagine an upside-down U, a curve shaped like a rainbow. The further to the right you move on the curve, the more stressed you are. The higher up on the curve you are, the better your performance on a given task. At the far left of the rainbow, you are completely relaxed, but not performing well. Move to the middle and top of the rainbow to a point where your stress response is turned on just enough and you are performing at your peak. Then you move to the right end of the rainbow where your stress response is at a maximum and your performance fails. Many of you have probably seen this schematic before, but it is true what it explains to us. And so when we are looking at causes of stress, we want them not to be things that we cause and things that can reduce stress, because when someone is information gathering, they're probably going to come with stress already about their project. And so that can be their stress. We can leave them with that stress to deal with and then improve everything we can on our part to reduce stress in our environment. Anyway, Sternberg goes on to explain that when we enter an environment, and it's a new environment, for instance, something like entering a school for the first time where you're going to go to school, or moving to a new city, we begin to look for recognizable patterns and connections that will reassure us. If we don't find things that can reassure us, we begin to feel unsettled, and that can grow. She even compared these new environments to trying to navigate a maze. And a maze, of course, is a structure that deliberately causes disorientation. So first, a new environment can cause anxiety in itself as an unknown quantity, and then one after another, or many all at once, new choices are added, some expected, many unexpected, until the highest combination of choices can cause a stress response of freezing. Sternberg goes on to describe how some architects of novel postmodern structures use what architect Frank Gehry calls handrails, devices in the design that make the viewing of such new, unfamiliar shapes and spaces easier. These features help viewers move from a zone of discomfort to the zone of excitement. They are employed so that viewers experience elements of surprise and then encounter familiar features that reassure. An example of a handrail might be artwork, as discussed above, that is not ambiguous or abstract and that shows something common familiar, such as a scene of nature. Another example of a handrail can be creating a home-like setting with homey decor because of familiar, comfortable connotations this can provide. Handrails such as these help viewers to not feel overwhelmed by too much of the new, strange, and unfamiliar, and instead help to lead them to a stimulation of the senses and inspiration. Now, of course, it may be hard to find handrails that will apply to all multicultural backgrounds, but we do our best in finding these handrails and, again, look for commonality in pleasant things. A wonderful thing about the changes that we can make in our libraries, these changes that we've been talking about, is that every type of user, not just multicultural users, can benefit from them, and there is no danger in overdoing them. So it behooves libraries to implement stress intervention strategies for all potential users. So to conclude, there are three main recommendations from this research that I've boiled down to just these three main things. First, train staff and plan physical space according to the attitude-centered approach of cultural competencies. And of course, remembering that cultural humility is key. Second, train staff and plan physical space to improve the perception of the multicultural user's sense of personal control. And third, enhance physical surroundings so that they aesthetically please, create safety, and stimulate the brain. Doing so will improve libraries and library staff as participants in cultural diversity. It will also reduce the library anxiety and hopefully stimulate the imagination of multicultural users so they have more success and more satisfying information-seeking experiences. Now, all this research that I've done, there is so much more out there. And these recommendations derived from the healthcare research are only a few of the abundant ideas that libraries and librarians can discover and find application for in planning culturally safe and responsive library environments. Now, for those of you who are interested in finding and reading this paper, here is how you find this paper. You just do a Google search, IFLA library, and in the IFLA library, you search Healing Library Anxiety, and you will find this paper here. And that is all I have. And so if there are questions, I am open to doing that now.
Great. Thanks, Valerie. That was really interesting. And for those of you that have questions or comments, go ahead and put them in the chat box, and we'll get those relayed. I just want to say personally, I thought this was really interesting, and I wrote down that phrase cultural safety, because I thought I'm going to remember that every time I devise something, either, even my office space where people meet, or when I do a presentation, thinking about how the library here can do things that will really help shape how I approach this. And I think you gave some really great, inexpensive and quick ways that we could address some of those ways of depleting somebody's anxiety when they're in the space where they're looking for information. Let's see. So Bruce says, this is very useful information. I appreciate what you shared. Took notes to distribute to others. So that's awesome. Let's see. We have a question. Did you find any staff training programs and or guides for cultural competence that you would recommend?
There are older ones and newer ones. I, of course, would go with the newer ones. I don't have any at with me right now that I can recommend specifically, but there is lots of literature about it. And so if you want some ideas from the literature, you can go get my paper, and it has a lengthy references section at the end that shows some of the research that describes some of these programs. Great, thanks, Valerie. Any other questions or comments from folks who joined us virtually? Let's see, we have a comment. Thank you. I thought a lot about service to our patrons who are experiencing homelessness or other economic stressors. Libraries are perceived as middle, upper class, and that, quote, culture might be stressful to people of different socioeconomic status. So that's a really good point. I absolutely agree with that, yes. Libraries are a lot of times perceived as a space for people who are educated or in the process of education. So that's one thing for libraries, I think, combining with community organizations that serve these people who feel less than middle class and feel uneducated or whatever, these people who are avoiding the library for whatever reason, it's good to combine with those and create programs that bring these people into the libraries. Great. Any other questions or comments for Valerie? Let's see, we have a question. When patron base is less than comfortable with variety and culture, how can we respond? That is a great question. And I know institutions where I have gone myself, I can see that it seems to, of course, cater to a certain culture and make others feel, of course, not welcome. And so, and that's for a reason, that we create audiences when we build our environments, of course. So I don't know if I have a great answer for that. Using the handrails idea, I'm trying to think as fast as I can, but I know that is a big problem.
Yeah, and Kim, that's great that you bring it up. I think it's it might be something we all can think about in the areas and the communities that we serve and work in. All right, any more questions or comments for Valerie? Well, Valerie, thank you so much. This is really interesting, and it's probably never a one and done thing, right? Because populations are constantly shifting and changing, and when we thought we've captured the right groups that might be coming into the library next year, they'll be completely different. So it's just, I guess, something to be thinking about all the time.
Yes, it is. And since I began this research, there's, of course, ongoing research about it all the time in both the library world and the medical world. And so when I say that there's a lot more out there for us to interact with in the research, it's true. It's always growing.
Yeah, and just a last comment from Heidi. She said, based on that last question of how do we respond to people who aren't so open to, or being open to other cultures, she says, that's a difficult one. We've had that issue here, and we're using separate doors for same space and also a visible window to the sacred conference room.
That's great.
So at least you've identified that it was an issue and tried to find a workaround to that. So that's awesome.
Right. Well, and as I've been thinking about that question, I think it's important to have environments in your library that communicate to other people that this isn't just the space of a certain population, a certain culture, and you'll still run into problems, I'm sure, of people saying, I don't feel comfortable with these other multicultural things. But if you have space that communicates without using even, speaking language, these are communicating the idea that all cultures are welcome. That is a beginning to dealing with some of this.
Great. Any last questions or comments from folks? Yeah, Heidi responds, changing the public mindset is the most challenging of all. We're open to them, but they don't feel welcomed, even with chocolate-covered strawberries. Well, you're trying, Heidi.
Yep.
All right. Well, Valerie, thanks once again. And for everybody on the call, I'm putting a link in the chat box to a whole variety of training opportunities that you can partake in. And we invite you to look at that calendar and get registered for things and get it on your calendar and make time for yourself for some professional development. And let us know if there's topics that you're interested in that we haven't addressed, and hopefully we can get to those in the coming year. So Valerie, thanks again. It was so great to have you here, and thanks for sharing your experiences and your research with us today.
You're welcome. Very glad to come.
And just an ending note, once again, this webinar will be recorded. We're recording it now, and we'll be posting it on our YouTube channel. And we'll be sending out that link to everybody who registered today. So feel free to share it with people who couldn't come. and then you'll have it if you want to refer back to it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the National Network of Libraries of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel. Select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.